governments, NGOs, and businesses gear up for the coming United Nations Rio+20 Conference on Sustainable Development, sustainable development is a hot topic at the moment, and deservedly so. And the EU is no exception. Here in Brussels, we just had Green Week, the largest annual conference on sustainable development and on European environmental policy. The European Economic and Social Committee, the building we're in right now, has been working diligently in preparing its contribution to the Rio+20 conference. My name is Stefan Hall. I'll be moderating today's discussion. And joining me, I have three members of the EU institutions Rio+20 subcommittee. We have Lorenz Garko, Andrea Carafa, and Federico Mazzoli. So, without further ado, I'd ask you to introduce yourselves and a little bit about the work of your subcommittee.
Thank you very much, Stefan. So, just to introduce the Rio+20 subcommittee, we are a group of young people working at different EU institutions, mainly at the Commission, but also at the ECOSOC, and we have someone from the Committee of the Regions as well. And we sometimes have relations with other young people who are beyond the Commission and the other institutions. We are here within the framework of different schemes like the traineeship programs of the institutions, the Marie Curie FP7 scheme, or the Carlos Schmidt scheme in Germany. And we decided to use our free time, our lunch time, very often, to do something constructive. So we basically started a group of people who organize a few activities here in Brussels to raise awareness on Rio+20 and sustainable development, and on what is the role of young people in this issue and in this movement.
Yes, and I understand you have an event coming up, is that true?
Yes, we have an event coming up at the end of the month, 31st of May, at the European Commission in the Madou Auditorium, in which we will have a few speakers from different EU institutions, including your president from the ECOSOC, and we also have young speakers, and we have invited a lot of young people who are mainly at the Commission again, because this is the largest pool we have, but not only.
And you have a side event at the actual Rio+20.
We are supporting a side event which is organized by a number of organizations. These organizations are AEGE, the European Students' Forum, the Road to Rio+20, UNFPA, the World Economic Forum's Global Shapers, and Green Young Economy, and the major group for children and youth, which is basically the major group which represents the interest of the children and youth at Rio+20.
I see. Very interesting. Now, as we've just noticed, and given the fact that sustainable development can be such a broad term, and it covers so many different intriguing and interesting issues, I feel there are a lot of compelling topics we can cover in a discussion like this. So, Federico, if you could begin by speaking of a sustainable development issue that's particularly important to you.
Yes, thank you, Stefan, for the opportunity to discuss a little bit about another pretty hot topic that is like the need to go beyond the GDP. Let me start with a very clear and powerful metaphor. Relying on GDP alone would be like actually driving a car only looking at the speedometer. And so the speed might be high, but what if the car is going straight against a wall? So we must begin with the questioning, where should we go? And so which kind of growth do we want? Sustainable growth is now at the heart of the EU policy as one of the three priorities of the Europe 2020 strategy. But what we choose to measure is extremely important, because what we measure is what we end up defining as a success. So the same can be said of also measuring the national well-being. And it is actually a long time that GDP has been used, and still it is, as a benchmark of national welfare, national success. But this fails to take into account things that really matter, like environment, health, education, and happiness in general. By the way, we can be kind of optimistic, because in recent years there has been like an explosion of activities and events with organizations from all around the world developing new measures and calling for indicators that look beyond the mere economic growth. I want to remind, like the Nobel Prize awards, Stiglitz words that stress that GDP tells you nothing about sustainability, whereas actually sustainable development needs a cultural change that is like an overarching and multidimensional approach. So we need to take into account also quality and not just quantity in our measurements. So it is not just about developing new indicators, but developing a collaborative community that works together to determine what and how we measure the well-being of societies. For all these reasons, Rio+20 can be, and actually must be, an extraordinary occasion to seriously discuss this GDP limitation that were officially recognized by the Summit Zero Draft, and to step up for a global dialogue on measuring well-being. Indeed, part of the objective of the rethinking of our measurement system is also to generate from the local to the global level a dialogue on what we care about. I want to conclude with Bob Kennedy's words pronounced like already in the 1968 about GDP, that measures everything, in short, except what which makes life worthwhile.
Thank you, Federico. Now if we could move on to Andrea, what have you brought to talk about today?
I would like to talk about the role of young people in the building of the green economy. There is momentum today for involving young people in the transition to the green economy, and this has been basically acknowledged by very important people and organizations. At the end of January this year, the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has announced his top 5 priorities for his next 5-year action agenda, and youth is one of the top 5 priorities. Sustainable development is the first one in the list. Now, this is not the only good news. The UN Secretary General announced that he is appointing a new special representative within his team, specifically for youth issues. Then we have the World Economic Forum, who recently started a new community to involve emerging young leaders in their 20s and to give them a space in the forum so that their voice can also be heard. There are more other news. I can keep talking for, let's say hours. I give you only one other news. The side event we were talking about, the official side event in Rio+20, has received the support of one of the UN Secretary General's special representative for food security and nutrition, David Navarro. So having this kind of support means that this is not an utopia. This is something real. This is something that needs to be built, and young people need to be involved in this.
Thank you, Andrea. Lauren, if you would like to continue with your chosen topic for today.
I'm going to talk about expectations, what expectations we have as the Rio+20 subcommittee for Rio. On the one hand, it's expected that 50,000 people will be there, of which 130 will be world leaders or nation-state leaders. However, we don't know who those leaders are yet. We don't know the specific interests which these nation-states are going to support. And also there's been the need for an additional negotiation phase in New York, which means that they're having difficulty in coming to common agreements. So on the one hand, our expectations can't be very high for the conference itself, but we have to think of the wider picture, and the fact is that there will be so many people there, and there'll be the opportunity for voices to be heard, which for the first time actually through the Zero Draft, small interest groups have been able to draft their opinions. Also, there'll be partnerships made through talking, side events, the negotiations which will happen there, which will lead to future partnerships, which may lead to something, to a platform happening in the future on which further development can be established. That's all.
All right, thank you very much for some very interesting comments here on some very interesting issues. I'll briefly touch upon an area of particular interest to me, which is I have a background from Canada and Sweden, so the demographic and the environmental changes occurring in the north of our planet are of particular interest to me, and I feel they're a very important topic to pay attention to at Rio+20. When it comes to demography, we know, for example, that towards the middle of this century, we'll be approaching the 9 billion mark in terms of world population. And most of those people will be living in major urban centers. According to the United Nations Population Division, the northern countries of the world will be poised to grow even faster than most other countries in other parts of the world, with Canada having an expected population increase of up to 31%, second only to India. Other countries like in Scandinavia, for example, Norway and Iceland, will be expanding at over 20%. And the implication of this is that the majority of this increase will come from immigrant populations, and we have to be able to sustainably integrate those people into our workforce and into our societies. When it comes to natural resources, the northern countries have some of the largest proven reserves of natural resources. Beyond Russia's propitious natural gas resources, or the Alberta tar sands, we also have the opening up of the Arctic Ocean and potential oil reserves that could be found there. Not to mention the hydrological cycle and the importance of the northern regions to that cycle and the availability of fresh water. So I feel that we have in the north, and as Europeans, we have a special responsibility to act as stewards for these natural resources that we're privy to. And I feel it'll be very interesting to see how those questions are addressed at Rio+20 and beyond.